Do you think that Vegas picked up on the fact that Rodgers said that in order to make his decision, he needs to go to a place of complete darkness? And the Raiders fan base happens to be called the Black Hole? What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Lombardi Time Brews. I'm your host, John Del Rey. Hey, before we totally dive in, we have a bunch of new subscribers, and whether you're just new to the channel or whether I got to meet you at the Wisco Collect convention show, really glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us on Lombardi Time Brews. And you know, right after addressing that, I also kind of have to apologize. Yeah, as you may have noticed, I was not in on Monday. I did put a post out on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. I found myself in urgent care on Monday because at the end of last week, my knee just like ballooned up and got swollen and really hard to move. And, you know, that's less than ideal. And turns out, so I went in on Monday and it's nothing too serious, just something that they had to address. And then I got all kinds of good and drugged up, and now I am back. So thanks for those of you who reached out either through a message or leaving a comment on the post that I made on YouTube. Thanks for your support. Thanks for your well wishes. It is good to be back. I'm feeling much better, much more mobile than I was for a bit there. So definitely glad to be back. You know, today, the main topic of the day, we are talking over the draft of 3 years ago. Yes, the infamous 2020 draft of the Green Bay Packers. Before we get to that, though, we do have a couple pieces of more pertinent news. Yes, it is the offseason thing still developing a little bit. Bit by bit, we're getting a little bit more clarity on Aaron Rodgers. Maybe we just need to turn all the lights off and stare into space and then we'll get better answers like he's going to do. Who knows? And look, I'm not aiming to knock him or his beliefs. If that's what he's got to do, that's what he's got to do. I kind of just hate that the future of the franchise is dictated, one, around one guy, but two, around one guy who needs to do all of that to decide if he wants to continue to play or not, wants to continue to play in Green Bay or not. I know that these are monumental decisions, but it is very tiring, is it not? So we are going to get to that. We're going to talk over some other key news as well, including the Green Bay Packers are losing one of their key executives today. Yes, Chad Brinker. Sorry, I had to look at the name there. Chad Brinker is a guy who in the Packers front office setup, he's done a lot of work under Russ Ball. I've seen some people kind of consider him Russ Ball's number 2 on the contract side of things. He's done some scouting work as well. He's considered a very well-rounded young executive. And obviously the Tennessee Titans took notice, announcing today that they were hiring him away from the Green Bay Packers, and he was instead going to become the assistant general manager of the Tennessee Titans. Albert Breer, who first originally reported the news, said for NFL.com, he's actually been on their GM candidates to watch list for 2 years in a row now. Certainly a young rising star, one of the many of the Packers front office. He is on his way out, going to Tennessee. For someone coming in, though, because we do have an addition, yes, we are hiring, supposedly, it's expected to be, it's not official yet, don't go look on Packers.com, it's not going to be there yet, but we are supposedly, as is being widely reported, bringing in Greg Williams to be the new cornerbacks coach. No, not the silver-haired fox who is in charge of Bountygate, not that guy, not that Greg Williams. This is a different Greg Williams, the guy who has been the cornerbacks coach in Arizona since 2019. Before even that, though, the 46-year-old cornerback coach, he had stints in San Diego, Denver, Indianapolis. He's really known for bringing a lot of talent out of situations that maybe didn't have a lot. And the thing is, too, we were kind of, or at least personally, I was hoping that this was going to be a younger voice, someone to bring in something new. We don't know where the disconnect happened between Joe Barry and Jerry Gray. One thing I can tell you is that as long as Jerry Gray's been coach, Jerry Gray presents this very ultra-aggressive, wanting, the corners to play tight. But look, as long as Jerry Gray's been in Green Bay, they haven't. That was whether Patton was defensive coordinator or Joe Barry. So maybe it was Gray? Maybe Greg Williams now will bring in the approach that wants his corners to play press man, wants them to play tighter. Now, we don't know if Greg Williams is coming in and just a cornerbacks coach or a secondary coach, or if he's going to assume all the titles that Jerry Gray had as the defensive passing game coordinator. We don't know yet until this hiring is made official, but by all accounts, it does sound like the 46-year-old coach is going to be on his way to Green Bay to join Joe Barry's defensive staff, and that vacancy is finally filled. Beyond that, in terms of other notes, the Rodgers news. Here's the deal. Okay, Rodgers was on McAfee on Tuesday, as he always is, and here's what he said. He said, there's nothing determined about his future. He did have a lot of fun, and I think it was the Pebble Pro-Am, joking with predominantly Raiders fans that they want him to come play for the Raiders, doing the thing that Rodgers does, right? And he said that there just isn't enough clarity yet. He has an idea in his mind as to what he wants to do. He did remind everyone that he's not a free agent. He is under contract with the Packers. My sense on this thing all along is that Rodgers has felt, and this is what he's alluding to with these wanting of honest conversations with Gutekunst. I think what he's alluding to is he feels that Green Bay wants to move on and isn't willing to be the ones to kick him out the door. So who's it going to be? Is it going to be, after Rodgers comes back, is it going to be Gutekunst moves on from him like Ted did Favre, or is it going to be Rodgers saying, I want to go? But nonetheless, it's appearing more and more likely that a split, an amicable one, but a split, is probably going to be in the cards. And Las Vegas and all the betting bookies and all the stuff, they all seem to agree. Because as of, I think it was yesterday, all of a sudden the odds all along, because you can bet on this now, all the odds all along have said that the majority, the likelihood is that Aaron Rodgers is going to wind back up in Green Bay. That he's going to take snaps week 1 for the Green Bay Packers. And then second place was the Jets, and then the Raiders, and then there's a litany of other teams like the Titans, Patriots, etc., all down the list. Buccaneers was on there. That's never going to happen. But yesterday, something changed. Vegas caught wind of something, right? And we've got these Reddit rumors going around that someone knows someone who's aunt's grandma, something who's a real estate broker, showed Rodgers around a house in Vegas. These things always seem to happen, and yet Reddit always seems to be freakishly right about these things. Reddit was the first one with the Davante Adams news, just no one chose to believe it. So, supposedly that's going around now. You've got all of these trolling things between Davante and Rodgers, Raiders fans calling out to Rodgers, James Jones showing up on McAfee yesterday wearing a Raiders shirt, encouraging, James, come on, know where your bread is buttered. It was in Green Bay, sir. And that's not even saying someone who, coming from someone who wants Rodgers to come back all that much. But look, yesterday, Vegas changed their odds. Most of the sports books changed it, not just a little, but changed it hard. To Green Bay, at first, was the third most likely team that Rodgers was going to come to. This was yesterday morning. And number 1, overwhelmingly, became the Las Vegas Raiders. So much that they were dictating that there's an 80% likelihood, plus 600, if I remember the numbers right. No, plus 600 was Green Bay. Sorry, I'll have to look up the numbers again. But overwhelmingly, about an 80% likelihood that Rodgers is going to go to the Raiders. Which is huge in terms of these types of things. It went from about 52% Green Bay to 80% Vegas. And as of yesterday morning, Green Bay was the third team on the list. The Jets was number 2. Now, as of last night, they did do another little updating, and the Raiders dropped a little, and Green Bay shifted up to number 2. But nonetheless, is this a case of Las Vegas knowing something? Or is this a case of them shuffling odds to get money? But to see this big of a swing, it's not just gamblers who took note. And then, on McAfee, Aaron Rodgers, just kind of alluded to, because they were talking about the Super Bowl, right? And they were talking about the money books and all these things and how it was working with the Super Bowl. And Rodgers just happened to drop in there that Vegas is normally right about these kinds of things. Look, Aaron Rodgers knows exactly what comes out of his mouth at all times. Let's not pretend that this isn't a very, very intelligent individual. very articulate, very eloquent. And he only says things for a reason. I'm not sure how much of it's a coincidence. Maybe it was trolling, maybe not. But for him to sit back, even if he's alluding about the Super Bowl, he knew people would pick up on this. And he said, Vegas is normally not wrong about these kinds of things. So we'll see. Now, one other real quick tidbit before I get to the 2020 draft. There is a new bobblehead being released by Foco. Yes, Foco, the ones who make almost all of the NFL bobbles. A Reggie White Pro Gate Series bobblehead. I'm going to put a link down in the comments if you want to check that out. I know it's a low-numbered bobblehead. I know in the next couple weeks it's expected to sell out. Reggie White bobbles always sell out quickly. They are very popular amongst the fan base. And this Pro Gate Series is really neat. However, I have a gripe. And that is the Pro Gate series from Foco is supposed to put these players in front of the stadium facades that they would have played in. It's a really neat series that dates back in time. And yet, for Reggie White, they completely screwed it up because they put Reggie White in front of the Lambeau facade that wasn't done until 2003. And anyone who knows anything knows that Reggie White wasn't playing in 2003. Foco, get your crap together. If you're going to honor Packers history, do it correctly. Nonetheless, I'll put the link if you want it. The link is there in the comments. Foco, get your crap together. Now, moving on from that, here is the review of the 2020 draft. And why am I doing this now? Well, because it's almost draft season. I am not one to wade into mock drafts and all this other stuff. We are a full 2.5 months before the draft. That's a long freaking time to go over mock drafts and speculation for things that just don't matter at this time. But it is always said that if you really want to know how a draft was, whether it was quality or not, it takes 3 years to become a reasonable grading time, right? Because the rookie year, they don't even know which way they're turning. Then you got second year, and really by the time a guy's been in the NFL in 3 years, you know what you have. So 3 years is a good time to assess a past draft. So today, we're assessing the 2020 draft, the infamous 2020 draft. Pick number 1, Jordan Love. Yeah, I mean, we're not going to talk about this too much because everyone has how they feel about Jordan Love. Whether you think he's going to be the savior of the franchise or, like that old guy who years ago said that Rodgers was going to lead us to the toilet bowl. Maybe Love is going to do the same. But regardless, we don't know what Jordan Love is yet. The Packers have a better idea than we do, certainly. And the players have said incredibly kind things about his abilities as of late. Look no further than Rasul Douglas a couple weeks ago, when he was appearing on a radio show and talked about how Love always seems to do the right things. Love is always right. But we don't know. And when you take that and you work it over an entire season, is he still going to make all the right decisions? Is when he played against Philadelphia, if you extrapolate that across an entire season, you've got yourself an all-world quarterback. But is that reasonable? We don't know. So whether he was a quality first-round pick, I have a feeling me saying anything here isn't going to change your mind one way or the other. But I'll tell you what, if he becomes a competent starting quarterback for the next decade, then no matter what, it was a quality pick. Should they have done it? Should they have not? That's up to you. So let's go ahead and look at the second round. Now, A.J. Dillon is an incredibly interesting discussion piece, and I want to pull out a couple additional stats here. A.J. Dillon, second round running back, obviously has become a cultural icon. Quadzilla, the Quad Father. He's a fan favorite. And the numbers, in some ways, are nearly identical between 2021 and 2022. But he just didn't seem to have the playmaking ability in 2022 that he did in 2021. Which is why when I looked back at the numbers, I was actually quite surprised that they were similar as they were. In fact, here they are. In terms of running the ball, 2021, he had 194 carries, 828 yards, 4.3 average. PFF score of 86.2. In 2022, he had 9 fewer carries, 185 carries, 769 yards, 4.2 average, so basically identical, 7 touchdowns. But a PFF grade 5 points lower at 81.4. it just didn't feel as strong this year. And you're going to hear that that's a pretty consistent theme all the way throughout this draft. A lot of these guys played better in 2021 than they did in 2022, which was kind of a team-wide problem. But when you have it occur on the second year of a draft, that's not a good sign. In terms of receiving, 2021, A.J. Dillon caught 34 of his 37 targets for 313 yards, 2 touchdowns. This year, it dropped to an abysmal 28 of 39. And considering most of his targets are approximately 3 yards away from the quarterback on outs and boots and things like that, that ain't good. But 28 of 39 for 206 yards and no touchdowns. Even if you look at some of the advanced metrics, A.J. Dillon appeared in some ways to be as efficient as he's been historically, but just not as much so. So realistically, you have to assess this. You can love A.J. Dillon. He's a cultural icon at this point. He's a fan favorite. But was he worth a second-round pick? And it's kind of tough to say. Now when other teams are getting guys like Breece Hall or other more impactful players in the second round, and that's not a knock on A.J. Dillon. It's just saying at this time, maybe he hasn't fulfilled everything that he should be yet. Heading into year 4, we'll see. Is Aaron Jones still going to be there, or is Dillon going to become the 1A of a 1AB running back relationship? How will that change things? Is Dillon going to become an effective runner in September and October as he is in November and December? Because there's pretty wide splits there. So, we'll see. It's okay to be a fan of him. It's okay to root for him. Absolutely, of course it is. But the numbers aren't quite there yet to consider him all-world, at least not in opportunity. His PFF grades are fantastic. Closed out the end of last year as one of the top running backs in the league. Overall grade of 86. But at this point, this was a step back. And it's okay to acknowledge that too, with the hope of getting better in the future. Moving on, round 3, Josiah DeGuara. And this is one of a few, I'm going to say, troubled draft picks. Look, he was a third-round pick. He was a tight end. He was injured a lot his rookie year, barely got to play. But now he's kind of found his role as the H-back. But the Packers don't want to seem to roll into that role too much. That even if he's a competent H-back, he's just not seeing the field. Overall, PFF is very low on his ability, scoring predominantly in the 50s across the board, a 48.2 run blocking grade this year. This year, too, his targets were cut in half year over year from last year to this. Even his inline tight end opportunities, he basically got a third of the snaps as an inline tight end. And I know the return of Robert Tonyan affected that. But DeGuara is a guy, when you watch the film, that does some really nice things. He does seem to block pretty well in spite of PFF's grade. He does seem to, despite some rather notorious drops, he does seem to have pretty good hands. But I'm not sure anyone's saying, oh yeah, Robert Tonyan can walk in free agency this year because they've got Josiah DeGuara to bail out the position. And you would hope for a 30-year tight end going on 4 years that you'd have more confidence, more ability to say, yes, he can be more than an H-back. Or he could competently replace Mercedes Lewis, and I'm not sure anyone's going to claim that either. So while he may be a contributor, just not sure they're seeing the return on investment there yet. Now, skip ahead because the round 4 pick was gone. Round 5, Kamal Martin. Kamal Martin never really latched on with the Packers. Look, he had a great rookie year. Actually was rated really well by PFF. Most of his grades were in the 50s and 60s, which for a rookie linebacker is really good. But then it just seemed like there were discipline issues. It seemed like there were other problems, even some tackling inconsistencies. And he was a surprise cut pre-last year. So after that, he went and latched on with Carolina, played a bunch for Carolina last year, graded out abysmally across the board, and hasn't really been heard from since. The story of Kamal Martin in Green Bay is a short one. The story of Kamal Martin's NFL career, it ain't much longer. Now, moving ahead to the 6th round, Jon Runyan Jr. Look, here's the deal. Last year, Jon Runyan Jr. was one of the least penalized offensive linemen in the NFL. And while he wasn't able to keep that consistently up this year, he was a very competent pass-blocking guard. For a 6th round pick, 3 years in the NFL, 2 of those being an every game starter at guard, you'll take it, especially within one of the best offensive lines in football, because I'll remind you again, they ended the year as the 4th highest graded offensive line in the NFL. And Jon Runyan Jr. is a key part of that. Now, do you want a superior run blocker at his spot? You may. Do you want someone with overall more aggression? I would understand that too. And I've seen some calls to upgrade him this offseason. I've seen more calls to upgrade Josh Myers next to him, because Josh Myers has been so up and down throughout the course of his 2 years. So for Jon Runyan Jr., of course, in a 6th round, you will take that all day, every minute of every day. Is he the future at guard? Maybe. But I could see them wanting to upgrade for certain traits as well. As a 6th round pick, though, you have to love Jon Runyan Jr. That's a win, and probably one of the best picks of this entire draft, regardless of what happens with anyone else. Another 6th round pick, another offensive lineman, that would be Jake Hansen. I have not been quiet on this channel about how I feel about Jake Hansen. It's not great. I don't understand, having watched him play, why he went from fringe roster player to week 1 starter this year. I know about all the injuries, but what the? Why was he ahead of Zach Tom on the depth chart? I don't get it. I don't know what the coaches see. I'm sorry. I just don't get it. There are 2 offensive linemen on this team that I just don't see what everyone else sees. Jake Hansen happens to be one of them. Yeah, he was a 6th round pick. You never expect much from there, and it is what it is. But that's the story of Jake Hansen. Will he be back next year? I tend to doubt it unless it's on a very, very cheap deal. Another 6th round pick, that would be Simon Stepaniak. And this is a very, very short story. Kind of an unfortunate one, too. Originally drafted as a tackle, the 3rd consecutive offensive lineman who was picked in the 2020 draft. And here's the deal. He basically got drafted, came to Green Bay, got hurt, was put on the non-football injury list, was there predominantly all of his rookie year. Was taken off that list, was put on the active roster for about 6 weeks. And then he was moved to injured reserve. That was in January of 21. And then all of a sudden in July of 21, getting ready for his sophomore campaign, the Packers shifted his name to the retired list. Never played it down, never played a snap. Who knows what happened? I'm sure enough digging, I'm sure enough research, maybe even contact him, and we'll know what happened. But one of the sadder stories of this draft for sure. Now moving on to the 7th round, we have Vernon Scott. And Vernon Scott is another very, very interesting and kind of troubling story. He was seemingly full of potential. He played in 15 games, logged 11 tackles in his rookie year. Did some nice work on special teams, even registered a sack early on in his career. Seemed to be that he had potential to be kind of this playmaking safety. Someone who played aggressive, hard, fast. And then it just stopped. See, he played 15 games in his rookie year, and then his 2nd year he played only 3 games. And then this year, if you recall, in training camp, one of the big stories of training camp is who is the safety depth behind Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. There's Micah Abernathy, there was Ennis Gaines, but there was Vernon Scott. And a lot of people assumed that Vernon Scott, who had been kept active all this time, the Packers, even amongst last year's struggles when they really didn't want to play him much, still kept him around all the time. A lot of people just assumed that he was being groomed to be safety number 3. And then training camp happened. He made some nice plays, wasn't consistent enough, got hurt, and then got waived. Was it discipline? Was it coaching? Was it consistency? At the end of the day, we don't know. But we do know that someone who started out with a fairly promising start for a 7th round pick is now nowhere to be found. And that takes us to last one, 7th round pick Jonathan Garvin. So look, he's still only 23 and a half years old. He entered the league as a youngin', but here's my assessment of Jonathan Garvin. You recall the movie Mean Girls, right? And I don't remember the character names. I'm not going to lie. I haven't seen that movie in a while. But there's some bit in there about how, stop trying to make fetch happen. It's just not going to. And that's kind of Jonathan Garvin. The Green Bay Packers just continually trot him out, trying to make him happen. And it just doesn't. And yes, he's young, very young. Been in the league 3 years and is only 23 and a half right now. But you just, he's consistently okay. You're not getting a lot of playmaking potential. When Rashawn Gary went down this year, all of a sudden he was usurped by Kingsley Enagbare, and quickly. Garvin consistently grades low across all metrics. How much more time does he have, in spite of his age, to prove that he can be a competent and consistent performer on the defense? Because his time, if they continue to load up at edge, may have run out this year. And that's my time for today. The 2020 draft is a complex, confusing, infamous draft for a reason. Ultimately, it's probably going to go down as one of the lesser drafts of Brian Gutekunst's GM career, no matter how long that lasts. Of course, if Jordan Love is the savior of the Packers, well, then no one's going to give a crap how the rest of the draft went. But if Jordan Love doesn't pan out, this could be the draft that defines the downfall of not only Brian Gutekunst, but the Green Bay Packers. Thanks for joining me on today's episode. I will be back on Friday with more news, notes, and additional Packers content. Hope you are having a great week. I hope your knee didn't swell up. I hope you are doing fantastically. And I will see you on Friday. As always, go Pack Go.